Josh, Andy Schoonover is here. In usual fashion, we just got a lot of good stuff out of the way before we click record, but we'll have to leave that up to the audience's imagination.
We got some
Andy?
saucy stuff on the Sovereign Health podcast just before we click record that we can't disseminate to the world, unfortunately. Now it's locked in.
We're going to have to tread lightly in this one too, Andy, because you're right. We're going to have to tread lightly though, because we're going to be talking, I'm sure, quite a bit about being paramedics, about our day job. We actually had an incident in our last episode where this happened a couple times on the show where we get a little too specific and we're like, wait, could that really fuck us down the road if a chief listened to that?
We've got to basically go, this happened to someone we know at a neighboring department years ago. Whatever story that we're about to just throw out there. Didn't happen with us. It happened with somebody else far, far away.
Yeah. 20 years ago, we knew a guy that worked somewhere else that once had a patient where this went down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, good.
Andy, how are you today?
Guys. It's been about a year since we last hung out. So appreciate y'all.
About exactly.
Yeah. Good stuff. And now is the time. Everybody's thinking about healthcare for next year. So I appreciate y'all having me on this time of year, as always. Last year was super fun. So I'm sure we will not disappoint this time around.
No, we won't. Yeah, we just finished open enrollment at the department. It's like herding cattle too. Like they send out the initial email from HR. You get half of the firemen that do it. Another week goes by. You've got stragglers. You got to kind of get the shepherd's crook around their neck, pull them in the pen.
It's that thing that it's like when you do sexual harassment training. Nobody wants to do it. Like, who wants to sit there and they want to click through don't touch anyone on the penis. Don't look at anyone's ass, obviously. Yes, I know. I'll take the bullshit quiz. I'll get 75% on it, and I'll move on with my day.
You guys,
some of those questions
direction.
are tough.
I was thinking more like doing taxes every year. It's one of those things you hate doing. We're actually going to put up a post either today or tomorrow on Twitter around do this once and never have to worry about it again. Because we don't have open enrollments at Crowdhealth. It's month to month. If you want to quit next month, you can quit next month. If you want to quit in 4 years, you can quit in 4 years. Our average person's, with us for 2.5 or 3 years or something like that. So, it takes 5 minutes to sign up. You never have to worry about it again. How beautiful is that? That's worth its weight in gold.
Sure is. Yeah, I heard you when you were on with Breedlove. One of my main takeaways that everyone listening is thinking is, why is the system and even just your plan, take it, if you've had a health insurance plan, an HMO, a PPO, whatever it is one of the most confusing things anyone ever comes across. I consider myself squared away on so many fronts. Personal finance, got everything laid out, can read through these documents, generally understand them. When it comes to healthcare, I am totally in the dark, and I know everyone feels that way, and it changes so frequently. Let's start with just a really high-level question. Take this however you want it.
What is an HMO and a PPO? I don't know. I don't know what those things are.
We don't even know what those acronyms mean.
I don't even know what that means.
Why is the system so opaque, Andy?
I think a lot of people make money when things are opaque, don't they? I mean, you got a whole group of people who are making money on the opacacy, whatever the word is.
Opacity,
opacity of our system. And so it creates tons of jobs. And in fact, it probably sucks up 30 or 40% of our healthcare dollars. Just people dealing with the opaque nature of the healthcare system. And so, as you're trying to change the system, you're taking a lot of food off of people's tables because they see they're, fearful that their job is going to disappear. And so, I think a lot of it is just that, it funds a lot of people, which then fund a lot of lobbyists, which then fund a lot of legislators who keep this craziness, intact, as opposed to, as I say, blow it up or burn it down. And so I think a lot of it, candidly, is that. We can go into more kind of mechanics of how health insurance works, but I think at a fundamental level, greed, the love of money, is the root of all evil, right? I think greed and money is the primary reason why our health insurance system is just so screwed up.
Yeah. And it's another one of those, bureaucracy begets bureaucracy. Because if you're a bureaucrat, the more of them you can have, more underlings you have, the more prominent you look, the bigger your raise is, the more, you move your way up the chain. You want to, this is the same reason like all these 3-letter agencies continue to grow, even when their mandates change or they're completely negated. Like there's multiple agencies that do the same thing, like ATF, FBI, there's overlap all over the place. But the more bureaucrats that I can get under me in this giant pyramid, the more successful I appear, the more successful I am in the end. I was talking to
something like, I forget what it was, but I think Ramaswamy said in one of his debates, or maybe it was something, an interview I was watching, like, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's something like there are 100,000 FBI agents and 70,000 of them are in Washington, D.C. field office, or Washington, D.C. headquarters. It's like,
it's wild.
70% of them aren't even out in the field doing stuff, to protect us. It's all bureaucracy on the back end doing, BS stuff in DC. I mean, it's just one example. And so again, those numbers may not be perfectly right, but it's like 70% of FBI agents are in that Washington headquarters. It's craziness.
Yeah. And it's also this duopoly that we have going on. There's 2 major healthcare companies, and the barrier to entry for anyone that wants to compete with them is so high because of legislation, and lobbyists haven't done what they've done. I mean, they've created a moat that is so far and wide that nobody can enter to compete, and lack of competition.
Regulatory capture, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not surprising when costs keep going up, when there's a duopoly and there's a moat so wide nobody can compete. I was asking.
Well, you have a couple really big healthcare companies. United Healthcare, I think, something like 10 or 12% of the United States healthcare costs go through United Healthcare. And so you have United Healthcare coming into, Austin, Texas, or whatever. This is where I live, and there's 2 big hospital systems here, and then it's a pissing match between the 2 big hospital systems and the United Healthcare, and the 2 hospital systems basically say, listen, if you don't want our hospital system, you lose out all of Austin, Texas. So I'm not negotiating with you. And so they just are like, okay. And the rates go up. And so, I think I mentioned this last year. It's like the hospital systems clearly want the rates to go up. The healthcare companies, the health insurance companies actually don't mind over the long term if healthcare, rates go up, because they make more money when healthcare rates go up. So, the buyer and the seller of healthcare both want healthcare to go up. It's going to go up. And there's just no market forces that are pushing, healthcare down, the prices down. So that's really what we're trying to change.
I was messing around with Google's Bard chat AI, and I asked it, how can we fix healthcare? And one of its top reasons, or one of its top
Crowdhealth
talking points,
right?
Boom. No, just the opposite. It said its first talking point was move to a single payer system where the government takes full control.
For God's sakes.
I'm like, you can't tell me these things aren't completely fucking captured when Google's the first talking point is, let's just let the government take complete control, because that'll fix this situation of a monopoly or duopoly that has just encompassed this whole thing. And Musk, I don't know if you guys heard about his new AI called Grok. It's fucking hilarious. So it is like the anti-woke AI. I just wanted to tell you this. So this woman asked it how babies are made. Listen to this thing's response. It says, oh dear, human, you're in for a real treat. Babies are made through a magical process called fucking. And then it goes on for like a paragraph explaining what that means in like extremely coarse terminology. I cannot wait to use this thing. And there's going to be nothing
in between. This is the problem with so much of society right now. If you've got, let's just take the realm of AI. You've got Google on one end, and then Elon's going to overcorrect on the other end, and all us normal people are going to be left in the middle with no useful tools. It's a freaking shame.
I was going to like what how to change healthcare into that one, and let's see what happens. If
I'm curious, I don't have access to it yet.
Up. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
we need to.
I will. Believe me, we're going to pay for it.
We need to have a follow up on that.
We do.
We will.
I want to read this quote. So I have a friend, Andy, that's a physician. Not going to say anything about him. No specifics. We're not going to get him in trouble. But I asked him yesterday when I was prepping for this, just high level thoughts. Didn't feed him anything about the direction we were going to go. Knows nothing about my views on it. Knows nothing about you. He sent me a long response. I'm going to read one section. He says, this is a physician. I don't think anyone is motivated to keep costs down. This is kind of a half-baked idea, but sometimes it feels like there's a giant circle jerk between the hospitals, government, and insurance companies to keep raising costs together. And I was listening on your podcast. You were saying health insurance is a B2B relationship. There is no direct-to-consumer component. It is a bizarre, incredibly important component of all our lives where the consumer, the person that's actually using the services, is basically cut out from this huge vortex that keeps rolling downhill in a troublesome direction. To go back to kind of the previous question, like, what is the history here? Because as we sit here on the sidelines, it seems so backwards and so dysfunctional. What do you, and if you don't have anything great here, feel free to pass and we'll go to the next question. But do you have any nuts and bolts to walk us through? I don't know what the timeline is, the last couple decades, the last 50 years of how the system got this wayward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was for hundreds of years. It's been community based, right? It's been either your community, your farming community, your agricultural community, whatever it is. If somebody gets in trouble, the community gathers around you and helps you out. They plow your field. They take care of your kids. They do whatever you need to do, right? And that's ultimately kind of what it was back 100 and 200 years ago. And then back in the 1920s, where Blue Cross Blue Shield kind of was set up. It was a mutual aid. So a bunch of people would get together and basically say, hey, if you get in trouble, I'll help you. If you get in trouble, I'll help you. And so there was a direct kind of peer-to-peer relationship there back in the 1920s. And that went on for a long period of time until, where's that website, WTF 1971 or 1972, whatever it was. Have you seen that website? 71? Yes. WTF 1971. Well, 1972, I believe it was the HMO Act that happened, and it basically put into law what our current healthcare system looks like. And then if you look at 1972 up till now, so the last 50 years, that's when healthcare costs just like skyrocketed. And so as long as you have these companies who in essence are responsible for your health as opposed to the individual responsible for their health, there is nothing to keep healthcare expenses down. Again, the market forces disappeared in 1972. We got depegged from gold in the 1970s. The market forces, and healthcare got, screwed up in the 1970s. And along with that, our actual health of human beings went down in the 1970s. So diabetes in the 1970s was about 1% of the population. Now it's up to 9 or 10% of the population, right? So we 10x the amount of diabetes over the last 50 years. And so all of these things are happening about the same time. So, it really went awry in the 1970s. So you can thank the, Nixon administration and others in the 1970s to help us with that. So, and by the way, the origin of the food pyramid started in the 1970s. It didn't show up for about 15 or 20 years later, but the 1970s is when the origin of that started. And so all these things happened at around the same time.
That sounds low, that 10% number of people with that are diabetics these days.
Because it sounds low to a paramedic. Yeah.
It's also because we see sick people all the time, but I would bet, what do you think, Dan? It's like 30 to 40% of people we see, I bet.
I mean, we literally are in the habit of, we check a blood sugar on virtually every single patient.
Sure.
Because that can be a factor for a lot of different presentations, but also we catch a lot of diabetes in the field. So someone calls you for a totally unrelated reason, you take their blood sugar, it's 328, and you go, hey, yo, when we take you in, you're going to need to look deeper here to see what's going on, because it's very likely that you're pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Sure.
So we basically check a sugar on everyone.
But pre-diabetic, I think it's something crazy like 30 or 40% of the population is pre-diabetic. So those are not people in the 300s, but those are people in the 140s, 150s, 190s, right? And so, I mean, it is skyrocketed over the last 50 years. And what they say is about a quarter of our healthcare expenses, so about $1 trillion a year, are being spent on diabetics. So $1 trillion a year on diabetics. And that kind of goes back to food. We can kind of go down the rabbit hole.
That was going to be my segue. I was going to say
crap.
Dan and I are paramedics. We see people day in and day out who have one major concern: insurance. They either have no insurance or they have some inadequate insurance that doesn't cover a thing, while sticking them with a huge premium. They're worried about the cost of the ambulance and the hospital. Sometimes they refuse to be transported to the hospital for urgent needed care just because they don't have insurance. This is where Crowdhealth comes in. Crowdhealth is not health insurance. It's better. You contribute every month to a fund that covers you and assists other members in need. If you ever have a significant health issue, you can get crowdfunded. You pay the first $500 and then the community will step in to help you out. Crowdhealth will negotiate on your behalf to obtain the best price possible. If you're sick of overpriced and underperforming insurance companies, try Crowdhealth. Support humans, not giant healthcare corporations. You can try it starting at $99 per month for the first 6 months if you use code BLUE. That's code BLUE. Have you been paying attention the last few years? If so, you know one thing. Not your keys, not your coins. This is a quaint saying, but it's real. If you're not holding your seed keys, you have a Bitcoin IOU, not Bitcoin. CoinKite is the maker of the Cold Card Mark IV. This is the industry standard for holding the keys to your Bitcoin. Holding your keys should not be intimidating, and it isn't. The Mark IV makes this an incredibly simple process. You could be a degenerate firefighter and hold your own keys. That's how simple it is. If you want to create a more complex setup, the Cold Card Mark IV has you covered there as well. You can create a multi-sig using a cold card, a tap signer, and even the upcoming Q1. Speaking of the Q1, if you want to have every bell and whistle and give yourself no boundaries as far as interacting with Bitcoin is concerned, the Q1 is your signing device. CoinKite makes some of the most sought-after gear in Bitcoin. The block clock, seed plates, the open dime, and the Sats card. Everything you need to secure your Bitcoin. Click on the link in our show notes to get discounts at the CoinKite store or use code BCB for 5% off the Mark IV.
Yeah.
Before we do move on to food, though, I wanted to hear because I know you had some illness recently, Andy, and you ended up in the healthcare system. Tell us just a bit about some of the most obscene stuff that you got charged during that experience, or some of the most absurd goings on.
And how Crowdhealth worked. Raw, just total, what worked, what didn't. Walk us through that whole process, too.
Yeah, totally. No, I appreciate that, because I think, so many screwed up things happen. And once you see it, like, you can hear about it. Once you experience it, it's like a whole nother realm, Yeah. And so, I was sitting here actually in this room having a Zoom conversation with a couple of my folks, and I couldn't put a sentence together. I couldn't come up with words. I started having slurred speech. And so
that's scary.
I shut down the Zoom call. I knew something was wrong. I went out here. I'm at the Bitcoin Commons in Austin, and Parker Lewis, actually, I'm sure you guys know Parker, was sitting outside. And I was like, Parker, call 911. So I get here, and some of you guys came. They took my blood sugar, and fortunately, it was 89 or something like that. They showed me this little card that has like little pictures on it. They're like, tell me what this is, and then they had me say something like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
Or skies are blue in Cincinnati.
I could not.
You couldn't.
Will Cole, many of you know Will, who's here at the Commons too. He kind of looked at me like, I was like, new tricks to old dogs can't. I'm like, I could not put it together. And so the EMS guys were like, we're out. And we, got me into an ambulance and got me to the local hospital. The great thing is I had my wife on the phone, and they were like, so what hospital do you want to take him to? And, the awesome thing about Crowdhealth is she didn't care, because we don't have any networks. Like, you don't have to worry about, is the hospital in network or out of network? Like, did not care. She just like the closest one. And you can imagine, right? Like, if one of your wives called you, or you got called and was like, your wife can't talk, like you'd be freaking out. And so she's just like, just get him to a hospital. Right. So that's one of the beauties. So, got to the hospital, and, within an hour, they realized that it wasn't a stroke. That's what they thought it was, that I probably had a really bad migraine that impacted my speech. But I got that news around 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the neurologist had left. And so they had to keep me overnight. So they knew it was a migraine by mid-afternoon, but they kept me overnight another 24 hours. Why? Yep. I don't know. I'm speculating here, but there was a lot of revenue generated in that next 24 hours. Some of the craziest of which was the IV drip. This is a bag of salt water, basically.
Yep. Bag of normal saline. Yep.
Yeah, that hangs from a metal rack that's connected to a little pump that I can buy online for $1,500.
The ones Dan and I grab at the hospital like candy and toss into the ambulance.
Yeah, exactly. And so you may have seen my tweet on this, so you could be cheating, but I got charged, I think it was like $5,300 for a $3 bag of saline.
That is obscene.
I mean, it was crazy. And then the next day, an occupational therapist and a physical therapist show up, and they're like, "Hey, we know you have a migraine. We're just doing this like formality so we can get you out of here." I'm like, "Great, no problem." She's like, "Put on your socks." And I put on socks. And brush your teeth. Brush my teeth. Let's walk 15 or 20 steps down the hall. We walked 15 and 20 steps down the hall. She's like, "Great, we're out of here." 10 minutes, maybe 15. Most of the time they spent it talking to my wife. And I get the bill, and they billed me 6 15-minute visits that ranged from like $200 to $400. I think it was like $2,000 total for 10 minutes. That was for a formality. And they said I had nutritional therapy and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Like, you were here for 10 minutes talking to my wife, and you billed me $2,000 for it.
Was the nutrition therapy like a donut and some cranberry juice, some crappy little cranberry juice they give you at the hospital? Unbelievable.
And I got double charged for the MRI. I got double charged for the CAT scan. I got double charged for all my health panels. I got a charge for $7 from the local lab for my comprehensive metabolic test or something like that. And the hospital charged me for the same test for $250. And so all of this, was like 26 grand or something like that. And so, somebody at Crowdhealth goes through that, looks at it, walks through it, like, so this happened and this happened, right? And then this happened, right? Like looking through the bill. And it was like, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Like, what the hell? Like, I was on telemetry even after they knew that I had a migraine, and telemetry is basically those little, you guys know what this guy is, like little things that they connect to you that's connected to a little $1,500 box that basically says, is my heart beating? In essence. And they charged me $5,200 for that. And it was like, that's kind of interesting that they would do that after. So long story short is you kind of go through this and say, all these things are bogus, right? So then we send that report to our legal team. Our legal team now writes that up and sends it to the hospital and says, listen, all of these things are bogus. You overcharged for this. We didn't get this service. And in essence, what I think is going to happen is that $26,000 bill is probably going to get down to $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 maybe.
Wow.
And again, I have to do very little. It's the Crowdhealth team does 90% of this. And then once we have that finalized bill, Crowdhealth will come back to me and say, hey, Andy, we negotiated with the hospital. We'll just say $3,000. We're not there yet. We're still in the negotiation process, but it's $3,000. Are you okay if we crowdfund this for $3,000? I say, yep, go and crowdfund it. I'll pay the first $500 of that. We'll send that to 25 other people, for $100 each. If they say yes, then $100 will go from, their Crowdhealth bank account to my Crowdhealth bank account. And then I can pay the hospital directly out of that account. Right. So that's in essence how that whole thing will play out. So it's very, very little effort on mine. The Crowdhealth team takes most of that for me because I don't know what CPT code 95083 is. Right. But, there are people at Crowdhealth that do. And so they can tell me what that is and whether it was, something that I should have gotten done and things like that. So it's a great experience, and it's way better from my perspective than getting an explanation of benefits in the mail and being like, what the hell is all this stuff? Right.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to be an ally to members, as they kind of walk through these really complex, health situations.
The fact of the matter is, if you're going to rectify nonsense, you have to be able to wade through it. Like you get these bills, there's so much bullshit on them. Well, somebody has to be able to speak bullshit or you're trapped inside the system.
Totally.
Cue the experts on your team. Other comment I wanted to say, we are thankful that you're okay. Because I will say, I'm sure Josh will agree that sudden onset expressive aphasia, which you had,
Yes.
I don't know what the stats would be just from my 7 years of being a medic, but that generally doesn't turn out well. I would, if I off the top of my head, 70 to 80% of the time, that's a blockage or bleed. Very thankful you're okay. And I think this is a good time in this episode to insert and discuss. A lot of people in the Bitcoin community, understandably, have tremendous distrust for healthcare and the broader just medical expertise, right, in the world today.
Especially
totally understand
years,
that.
Right?
Totally understand that. Completely sympathize with that. We share a lot of those opinions and dispositions. In your situation, though, you made a very, very intelligent choice to tell someone what was going on, recognize the potential severity, and act on it. Because there have been people, even in my own life, that have so much distrust to the system that there's this sort of hubris to think everybody's a clown. I'm going to do mine. I'm never going to the hospital. I'm never going to seek treatment. Fuck the whole thing. But the fact of the matter is there are some things that happen in your life. Chest pain, sudden onset mental status changes, vision changes. The list could go on. Non-negotiables that if you're, I don't care what your setup is, if you start to experience these things, you need to be honest and you need to seek treatment. And the shame is, we talked about this some before we click record. I think that the saddening part for us and the part that makes our heart break some at work is that even for a lot of our patients, the most stressful physical predicament that they've ever been in, that we show up on, also turns out to be one of the most stressful financial predicaments they've ever had. And Josh and I will both agree, we have looked people in the eye that are having crushing chest pain, that need immediate treatment and transport, and their primary concern is, where am I going? I need to go to the right place. And how much is this going to cost? And the two of us sit there and we have absolutely no clue how much it's going to cost. We don't know anything about the complexities of what network they're in. They have to go. They're wrapped into this giant blanket that could go anywhere. And they're just at the mercy of a system. There's no predictability to what's about to happen to them. And that is anxiety producing. It's heartening to hear, at least with this sort of arrangement that you have and that you folks are building, there's a sense of predictability and transparency and understanding for what's about to happen, where you and your family can focus on the immediate physical need, not the financial stress of what's going to happen next.
Totally. Look, I think it's a really important point because, the alternative for many of the people who are considering Crowdhealth is Obamacare. And most of those plans, if you have a family, is $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 deductibles. And so that's a big enough number where you really have to think hard. Like, do I really want to go and do this? And for me, I started gobbledygook in my words. I'm like, something's wrong. Like, I got to go. I didn't even think about it. Right. And it's like, you don't have to think about whether or not I should go to the hospital when you have ultimately, if that was a stroke, a brain bleed, like it could have killed me. Right. Like that's the last thing you want to do when you have a condition that could kill you, And so it's like, I was sitting in the hospital bed, and my wife was sitting there and I was like, this is great because I don't have to worry about my healthcare right now. I mean, my bills, like all I have to do is worry about my health, and all you have to do is worry about your health. And like, that is the beauty of what we have. And one of the reasons why we say, hey, listen, you need to come up with a little bit, $500 before the community will come and help you out. You got to have a little skin in the game. Everybody should be able to come up with $500, but I don't think everybody should or has the ability to come up with $10,000, $12,000, $14,000, right? And that's going to put people into really big financial stress. And so I was sitting in my bed like, I'm not worried about this. I don't have to worry about any of this. I was kind of playing the game. Like, I'm wondering what they're going to do and what they're going to charge me for, because this is kind of fun. Like, let's see, let's pay attention here. And so that I think is one of the biggest benefits of Crowdhealth. I can go and get really great care, and I don't have to worry about the ultimate cost of that. Because I think I know with a high probability the crowd is going to help me out, and that ease of peace of mind is really valuable to me.
Yeah, you would be shocked how long people delay calling 911 with chest pain. People wait days sometimes with chest pain before they decide might be a good idea to call. Or it's not usually with strokes because it's so obvious that people are like, wow, something's going on here, I got to call. But yeah, people will go days with chest pain. Even people that are even retired firefighters that I know waited. I know one person in particular waited a day or two, and then like luckily was okay. But it's a combination of like anxiety because they're afraid of something's wrong, and it's almost like one of those, if I put my head in the sand, it'll go away. Well, it's probably not going to go away, and it's the other crushing financial side of it that a lot of people are scared of, and that combination can be literally deadly.
Look, I mean, I think real quick, a part of me is like hates that people look at Crowdhealth and be like, oh, well, it's so much less expensive than the others. Like, yeah, it is. But the other part of this too is I think you get better care. Like the fact that you don't have to worry about going to the hospital when you need to go get to the hospital, the fact when you get to the hospital or you get to the doctor's office, people actually treat you differently. Because I always say, you know, I've posted this on Twitter a couple of times, like, you work for whoever pays you. And so the doctors are paid by the insurance companies. And therefore, what they can and cannot do is dictated by the insurance companies. Whereas if I'm paying the doctor, like, they do what I want them to do. They ask me, you know, this doctor shows up and he's like, hey, so I don't know if you're having a stroke. I want to give you a medication. And I just want to let you know that this could make your stroke much, much worse. Or you know, may not have any impact at all. And do you want that? Me and my wife looked at it and we're like, hell no. Like, hell no, we don't want this. But they gave us a choice, right? Like, they gave us a choice on this. You know, and so it's like when you're given a choice and when you're dictating the path of care, I mean, there's a ton of empowerment in that, you know? And thankfully I just said no, because that drug for 75 milligrams or whatever this drug was, it was $40,000. So thankfully I said no. I didn't know that at the time, but
wait, was that before your
40,000?
I'm assuming that was after your scan, right? They already did the scan
no,
before they offered that
scan.
up.
It was before my scan. Yeah. Before my scan, they said you could be having a stroke right now, because they showed me this little card, and you guys probably know these cards. One of them has this boy on a chair grabbing a cookie jar, and he's like, what is that boy grabbing? And I said, the closest I could come was birthday cake. Like, I couldn't even come up with he's like, this guy's like, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah.
So they thought I was having a stroke. You know, fortunately after the CAT scan and the MRI, they're like, yeah, this is not a stroke. It's something else. So anyway, it's too much into details my brain.
What it makes me think of as you're talking, and this might be interesting for Crowdhealth community and a lot of our listeners, because we really are on sort of the other side of some of these incentives. Being a fireman's really interesting, because we're paid by a municipality, but our licenses are under a medical director. We're totally the first chain in the healthcare system headed to the hospital, but we're this weird in between, and we face a lot of the sort of cumbersome dynamics of an overly litigious and large healthcare system. But yet we do this whole other firefighting thing. Kind of a weird spot, but we do get a window into it. And hopefully not saying too much. Like, if you call us, right? If you call 911 in our community, we show up with 5 paramedics, which I think is the best level of care, because if you're having a very significant issue, all those hands on deck are great. But it pretty much doesn't matter whatsoever what your complaint is. We have to recommend that you go to the hospital. Okay, we're at a point in society, and just the amount of litigation towards first responders, which has escalated tremendously in the last couple of decades, where the days of saying like, you're good to stay home, they're basically over. So you could call for a hangnail and we're going to be like, we recommend transport to the hospital. You know what I mean? And so you have to now magnify our position tenfold for a doctor, where the buck really stops, right? If you're the ER physician, how you're getting much closer to where the buck stops. And when you follow the incentives, which we love to do as Bitcoiners, you realize that there is a motivation to cover their ass and to cast an enormously wasteful wide net on all the possibilities that could be happening with Andy, right? Because healthcare is not a perfect science. It's a giant game of trial and error. It takes a long time to narrow the possibilities down to what it could be. But you can always play the what if game. What if it's this obscure random thing that happens to 16 people a year in the United States? Well, we have to do the blood work to see if, you know what I mean? And so you kind of
Sure.
You get to this point where it just adds up: CT, MRI, blood test, x-rays for something that maybe just needed an assessment. But what I'm saying here, I'm not saying that to demonize the physicians, because I'm saying we feel that on our end. We'll have patients where Josh and I could stand.
The physicians don't know, what these things cost.
Yeah.
They have no clue.
Have you had the intention to mine Bitcoin, but thought that the equipment is too expensive or that running your own miner might be a bit too technical? Maybe you thought it would be cool, but the cost of electricity where you live makes it pointless. With HeatBit, you can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. It's a Bitcoin miner, a heater, and an air purifier all in one. It's a plug-and-play device that could not be simpler to operate. It has the latest 5nm chips to make it one of the most efficient Bitcoin miners in the world. On average, the HeatBit Mini pays for 70% of the electricity it uses. The HeatBit Mini also operates quietly. Good luck selling the idea to your wife that you're going to plug in Bitcoin miners in your basement that operate at the volume of a lawnmower. Not going to happen. HeatBit operates silently while keeping your significant other warm and cozy. HeatBit cares about your marriage. So, if you want to mine Bitcoin and remain married, order a HeatBit Mini and keep warm while it pays for its own electricity bill. Visit heatbit.com and use code BCB for 5% off a HeatBit Mini.
They're just trying to cover their ass, right, Andy? It's essentially at the end of the day. And so
I think that's right. My only pushback on that, though, is like, a lot of people, you mentioned labs, right? And people get labs. I got labs twice while I was in the hospital, and I think they cost $5,000 or something like that. I think waste, or the total price of something is, the total cost of something is price times quantity, right? And so what we're talking about is the quantity side. What I think is really screwed up is the price side, right? And so I can go get a full set of labs for $50, right? And if I want to go get a full set of labs for $50 4 times a year just to see kind of where my thing is that wasteful at $50 or is it not? Now, if those same labs were $2,500, which I think mine were, something crazy, like 4 times a year, which is $10,000. Now, is that wasteful? Like, that's where I think we are really getting screwed up, is because the MRI, which is probably, $100 worth of marginal cost, something like that, you charge me, I don't know what it's $5,000 or $6,000. Like, that to me is where the problem is. It's like, what if we put tools in the hands of paramedics or doctors or whatever that were actually like really low cost tools? Because, maybe we only need, this is maybe a terrible example, but like maybe we only need a colonoscopy once out of every 10 years. But if I want to pay the $700 to go and get a colonoscopy once every 3 or 4 years, like, go for it. Is that wasteful? Like, I don't know. Your decision, your money. Yeah. You can go do whatever you want. And so, but is it wasteful at $5,000? Yeah, probably. Right. And so if we can get these prices down, which I think, you can't tell me that a bag of salt water is $5,400. Like, you just can't. Yeah. Right. Like, there's no way that you can, logically get there. And so, like, that is the problem.
And it's definitely a combination of things, though. It's amortizing massive costs of bureaucracy. There's one thing. It's amortizing the litigious nature of the U.S. system in general, and then it's amortizing the actual costs that are there, which is, I think we all understand that bag of normal saline is definitely like $5. Yeah. But like, there's so many other things built into it. Plus, there's probably a massive percentage of people that simply don't pay their bill, so they're amortizing that in there too. There's a lot of shit that's getting tossed on top of this. That's, I'm not justifying it at all, but what I'm saying is, I think, and then there's obviously like, there's got to be a profit margin somewhere. This is all completely understood by everybody, but it's just the massive overreach and like just obvious screwing you over when you're getting charged $5,000 for a bag of saline. That is so preposterous that it's hard to believe.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. And so there's another kind of fun, maybe People Magazine tidbit or something, but like, Princess, what's her name? What's William's wife's name? Sorry, I'm not a People Magazine.
We pay no attention to this shit. We're the two worst people that ask.
Is she the crazy one that took him to L.A.?
No. It's the other one.
Whatever. The other
Prince
one.
William had his last baby at basically like the nicest hospital in London. Like, it's like the Ritz-Carlton of hospitals. And that pregnancy, I think, cost $8,000. Okay. So this is private room with maid, which like $8,000. Our average in the United States for a birth, vaginal birth at run of the mill hospital is like more than twice that, right? And so something is going wrong in the United States healthcare system that makes the most expensive place one of the most expensive places on the planet, London, cheaper than Temple, Texas, which is twice that, right? Like it just doesn't make any damn sense. And I think it's the bureaucracy on the back end that basically the hospitals can just jack up prices every year, right? And so and therefore they jack up the cost structure every year through a bureaucratic BS on the back end, so they can look at everybody and say, hey, look, I'm only getting 3 or 4% margins. It's because your cost structure is totally crazy. Right. I was watching the All In podcast. I don't know if you guys watch All In podcast. Yep. One of my favorites. It was from 2 or 3 weeks ago where David Sachs was talking about, I forget it was like an RPG or something like that. The United States pays, I'm going to screw up the numbers, but I think it's like $7,000 per rocket propelled grenade or something, where Russia is $700. So we pay 10x what Russia has, but because the United States government has this cost plus system, so all these in this military industrial complex, all they do is keep ratcheting up costs so that they can put 10% on top of that, and therefore you get $7,000 grenades as opposed to $700 grenades. And it's the same thing happening in the hospital system. They're just ratcheting up costs without thinking about how to have a low cost structure, and you just get these preposterous out of crazy prices. I think it's very analogous. It's not perfect, but it's pretty analogous of how this is going on.
Another good analogy for just showing how the free market can step into some of these government monopolies and just show the power of the free market is what Musk has done with rockets. The SLS rocket, which is what NASA's been working on for 20 years now, it's recycled shuttle parts, and it's costing $1.5 billion per rocket. And it's not reusable. It goes up once, it's gone. Where SpaceX is doing that with, it's like $150 million to launch one of their rockets, which are fully reusable. And they've done this in the last 15 years or so. So, I mean, introducing actual market forces into something where, it's been an oligopoly of a few different, like Boeing and ULA and a couple others, but that is just a huge exclamation mark on what we're talking about here. And it's actually happening in one of probably the most complicated endeavor humanity's ever done. And he did it 10x less, 10x improvement.
And I think maybe it's not 90%, but it's at least 50 or 60%. You can do the same thing in healthcare.
For sure. It's nowhere near as complicated as rockets.
8% of healthcare costs go to the actual doctors. 8%. So 92% is going to something else.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's a crazy statistic. Wow.
So the doctors who are taking care of you is less than 10% of what the actual cost is, right? The cost. So, I think there's a long way to go, downward deflation in healthcare if we can introduce, some kind of market economics. And that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. Look, for my bill, I'm going to get my bill down by 80% or more, right? Just by pointing out the ridiculousness of some of these charges that the health insurance plan, they just will pay it. Like they'll just pay it and not worry about it, right? And so it's like, and you'll be happy that they pay it. But we're going to go in there and say, no, all this is BS. Like you can't do this. And, in fact, we're talking to attorneys to say, like, is there a systemic hospital ploy to keep prices going up by overcharging people, in essence, price gouging, which we think there are both state and federal laws being broken here. And if that's the case, then we're going to go, we're going to go to the mat with some of these big hospital systems to say, you can't do this. Like, you can't do this on a systemic basis. You can't charge me $5,000 for a bag of saline. Like, you just can't. That's not fair. It's very similar from my perspective on, people fleeing Florida on I-95 from hurricanes, and these little, crappy motels along the way say, oh, I'm going to, charge $1,000. Like, that's outlawed. You can't do that. In the same way, you can't have somebody who, can't talk and you take them to the hospital. You can't charge them 100 or 200 times, what the cost is. Like, that is price gouging. And it should be illegal if it's not. and we're looking very hard on whether it is illegal. And if it's not, then I think these should be categorized the same way as those, crappy motels along I-95 or I-35 in Texas or wherever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's when you walk in to an emergency room unable to speak, you're basically a house on Halloween with a bowl of candy and nobody at the front door.
Totally.
And the kids who are the hospital, the kids are just coming in and absolutely cleaning your clock. They're taking everything. They're taking the Kit Kats and the Reese's and the Sour Patch Kids. And there's nothing you can fucking do about
They're
it.
Toilet papering your house and, throwing a brick through your window.
Yeah, but in healthcare, the thing is, nobody cares because what you're doing is you're extracting as much value out of United Healthcare, which might as well be Darth Vader, right? Like we're screwing Darth Vader, right? Like nobody cares if Darth Vader gets screwed,
right?
And what we're trying to say is like, no, you're screwing me, a human being who has to ultimately pay for this, and that's where I think the dynamic changes. Is if doctors can see, like, look, we can't maximize profit here because this is Andy. He's got to pay this out of his own funds. This is not United Healthcare. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And we have story after story of people, including myself, who have had doctors say, oh, you're self-pay. Like, okay, I'm going to think about this differently, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience when you tell a doctor that you're self-pay. They're like, this is awesome. Now we can actually have a doctor-patient relationship without the government or insurance being in between us. Like that's the way that it should be.
To switch gears a tad, we want to get to some health stuff, but I want to get this one in because I think it's a little bit of a unique angle and one we want to prioritize. We have a tremendous amount of respect for people like you that are out there creating the new, right? Founders, entrepreneurs. This process that you've gone through is really involved, really challenging. Walk us through more just the business side of getting an idea and then carrying it out to fruition. What are the challenges, frictions, and rewards that come with that whole process? And like how you do it day to day, because it's so demanding. I'm sure you've got a family. You're trying to captain this entire ship. I know you got a huge team, but there's a lot of stress that comes with this path that you're on. Talk to us just about that, about the last few years and the stresses of being a founder of a new company.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those where you've got to decide, right? Is the stress of running a company worth it? Or do you want to be in the stands watching, being commentators? And so for me, it's just my personality. It's like I can't be in the stands watching. I got to go and do. I got to go do something. A part of my just purpose on this planet. I think God put me here to find gaps where people are struggling and try to help them. So this is, I guess third time I'm doing this. And so, it is just in my wiring to be like, I've got to be in the arena, the Roosevelt quote about, the man in the arena, like that one, every time I read it, I'm almost like brings tears to my eyes. It's like, I wish more people would know that quote. I wish I need to memorize it, but it's like, basically,
I know
like,
exactly the one you're talking about.
You're gonna get toiled and spit at and and all, but you're doing something. Like you're in the arena, actually making this world a better place, as opposed to sitting at home and writing blogs. Like I don't mean to rip on people writing blogs, but like if you want to be the commentator, but you don't want to actually go in and do the work, like I have very little respect for that type of person. If you're in the and by the way, online, I get ripped all the time for trying to disrupt the healthcare space. And if you're not doing something about it, like then who cares? Like shut the hell up. If you're actually doing something and disagree with me, then I'm like, okay, like let's have a conversation. Like at least you're doing something. At least you guys are like battling the fire and you guys are battling, the illness or the sickness that people are bringing you with. Like you're actually doing something about it, And so to me, that gives me a ton of energy and it comes with stress. But I think the one thing that I'm pretty good at is, majoring in the major and minoring in the minor, meaning really, really focusing on like, what are the big things that can have an impact on my business today, and I show up at work at 8:30 and I'm out by 5. I make sure that I'm like with my girls. We talked about our kids before we started this. Like me being with my girls every night for dinner is way more important, than anything else I'm doing. And so it's just
Amen.
a priority. Like everybody knows, like I'm gone at 5 and my investors know that. I'm like, my girls are, 1, 2, and 3, including my wife. Right. Like, and so if you want me to be here until 10 o'clock at night, then, I just can't do that. Like it's not in my, but then it makes you focus. I don't think anybody's more productive than me during the 8 hours that I'm at work, 8 or 9 hours that I'm at work every day. And so it's just like, I think entrepreneurs, I see them all the time, like spinning their wheels on stuff that just does not matter. It's like, it's a constant question for me. Like, is this having an impact? Is this conversation with you guys having an impact on my business? Like, I got to ask that question. Right.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, thousands of people are going to hear about Crowdhealth and like at least have some interest in what we're doing. That's great for my business. I got to make those decisions. And so some people just have a very difficult time making decisions like what can have an impact on my business today, and therefore spend 12 hours a day doing jack because you can't figure out what makes an impact.
What you just delineated there, one of the things I think, it's the omission. It's the ability to say no when that's the right thing to do. I think a lot of people have they want to be people pleasers. They want to make everyone happy. So they say yes to everything, which you're making a decision that can be very negative for you in the long run if you're trying to appease everybody instead of picking and choosing what the most important things are. And obviously not being an asshole to people when you say no to them, but doing it in a courteous way that, but you just can't say yes to everybody. I think that's one of the biggest problems that people have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say,
you got to put a monetary value on your time too. Like, I got a monetary value on my time. Is this worth X dollars to do this? Right. And if it is, I'll do it. If it's not, then I won't do it. So you gotta constantly have that kind of like, is this worth my time? And you probably have to think what your time is worth and multiply by 2, so you can actually get a return on your time, not just paying you back, but actually getting returns on your time. And so those are the things that are going through my brain all the time. Like, is this worth, and in my case, I say like 4 or 5 times X what it costs to have the company to have me, because they need a return on the money that, they're spending on me to go and produce. Right. So that's ultimately the way that I look at it.
Folks, when a fellow firefighter, family member, or friend asks us where we buy Bitcoin, we point them to Swan. It's the place Josh and I have dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin for years. At Swan Bitcoin, you can set up automated Bitcoin savings plans as well as execute instant purchases. They serve clients of any size, from firefighters to institutional investors, and an account is startlingly easy to set up. I've watched a fireman do it on a smartphone while sitting in a recliner in less than 7 minutes. Swan also offers Bitcoin IRAs. You can start or roll over a traditional or Roth IRA with enterprise-grade custody, attentive service, easy onboarding, and transparent fees. And visit swan.com for details on everything that Swan offers. Ladies and gents, the fact is that Bitcoin remains decentralized because its ledger is distributed all across the globe. The thousands of computers that keep track of who owns what and ensure the accuracy of the Bitcoin blockchain are the nodes. You ought to be verifying your own transactions and balances, as well as enforcing the consensus rules yourself. The software and hardware we use to run Bitcoin nodes is StartOS by Start9 Labs. With StartOS, you can fire up a full Bitcoin node in a very easy plug-and-play fashion, but you can also do way more. Start9 gives you optional capabilities to run a full-blown private server, allowing you to easily and incrementally level up and opt out of today's increasingly centralized and alarmingly censored cloud computing model. Just as Windows and Mac OS made it possible for anyone to run their own personal computer, StartOS makes it possible for anyone to have their own personal server. Run a Bitcoin node, run a Lightning node, run a NOSTR relay, control your own photos, videos, and messages, and much more. Check it all out at start9.com. When I put myself...
I tell you what, like, if it works, if you're there's nothing greater than seeing it succeed, right? Like, there's nothing greater than the person in Arizona that needs the brain surgery that was like $70,000, getting him to a better brain surgeon for $22,000. You're like, hell yeah, we're changing something, right? And so that feeling is what you're like driving at. Like, that's the feeling that I want. And I get that every day with Crowdhealth, which is awesome.
Badass. And when I put myself in the shoes of someone like yourself, Andy, Josh has another side business. We have this, but our primary vocation, it has its challenges for sure. We're running ambulance calls in the middle of the night. sleep deprivation. We do some crazy wild shit. We make some decisions to go in some places that a lot of people wouldn't want to. But one of the greatest, I guess you could say, luxuries from a work-life balance standpoint of our job is when we clock out, we are out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got off duty this morning at 8 a.m. Yes, I worked last night, but I'm done. Like I'm off for 48 hours. I'm completely off. When I think about someone in your position, even having scaled this tiny business, I'm like, how do you turn it off? Because you're in this environment where there is an unlimited amount of work that Andy Schoonover could do in a week. You could clock 300 hours if they existed theoretically working on Crowdhealth. And so you have to make a decision of how to truncate that down. And that is so much easier said than done. Even running a podcast like this, there's so many more hours in the week we could spend. A little window into how Josh and I run things. And one of the reasons I'm grateful for Josh too, is that when you do this as a partner, you have a good team around you. You have accountability looking at each other to decide what's efficient, right? Josh and I both bring things to the table. And so like, I'll be paying attention to some obscure detail and Josh will be like, Dan, it's not worth our time. Right. And so it's just helpful to have
the
that.
opposite is also true. I won't be paying attention to an obscure detail. And Dan's like, dude, you got to pay attention to that detail.
But yeah, see, this is where we respect what each other brings. Like I'm constantly attuned to him saying that might not be important. And he's constantly attuned to realizing, Dan, I have to edit that out, maybe picking up on
not editing that out.
Dan may be picking up on this important nuance that I haven't thought of, right? But without that accountability, awesome. Either one of us could run rampant on opposite side of the spectrum. You know?
Yeah. You know, look, I think that the way that I kind of look at it is there are kind of 5 components that I pay attention to. And if one of the components get out of whack, then I get out of whack. One is like sleep. If I don't sleep well, I get screwed up. If I'm not working out, I get screwed up. If I'm not eating right, you know, I get screwed up. You know, if I'm not in counseling, I do counseling. It's just a part of, you know, what I do. You know, I get screwed up. And what did I missed one. But you know, if you can focus on like what are the things that make my life work really, really well, and then just make sure that you're you know constantly doing those things, then I think you'll be okay. So if one of those got out of whack, then I ate like crap last night, you know, and so I ate like crap, and now my sleep was bad last night, and I was up at 2:00, and I stressed out from 2:00 to 4:00 about things going on in the business, and I was like, yeah, if one of those things get out of whack, like it just totally snowballs,
it cascades,
into bigger issues, and so it's like you've got to. Oh, my 5th one was quiet time. For me, it's you know, meditation, prayer, whatever you want to do, like that's got to be a component of what we do too. So, you know, as long as you, and I can say that at 44, when my first company was at 28, like I didn't have that at 28. I now have that at 44, almost 20 years later, because I kind of learned along the way, like those are the 5 things I have to have honed in, or else I can't do what I want to do during the 24-hour day.
I've been listening to a ton of Joe Rogan lately, and I'm listening to your health podcast, Sovereign Health. And one of the things Joe constantly talks about is ice baths. So this morning I was like, I'm going to do this. I filled a tub with the coldest water that I could get out of my faucet. I went and got a ton of ice. I got as much as I could get out of my fridge, which is really not that much, but it was like maybe 2 gallons of ice. I got the temperature down to 45, and then I got in. Cold. Holy shit. That is, and he says he does 33 degrees, which, my God, that guy's a fucking animal. But at 44 degrees or whatever it was, I stayed in for like 3 minutes, and then I tapped out like a bitch. But try it out. It's an experience, that's for sure. And then I get a little workout in. Man. Yeah, I was pretty stoked. I couldn't get my whole body in because the tub's not big enough, but I jammed as much of myself into that as I could. It was an experience. And I think if you can really hold it down, and one of the things he talks about is telling yourself to stop being a bitch, because everything in you doesn't want to do it. You do not want to get in that water. But forcing yourself into it, having the discipline and the mental fortitude to just force yourself to do the thing you don't want to do, I think that it's just a good discipline to have yourself in, to like go force yourself to work out, force yourself to eat some decent food. You don't have to like kill it. You just have to do it on a consistent enough basis where you can, you know, feel better. Totally. And then that also cascades on itself. You know, you feel good. You feel like you want to go work out, and then you get into this discipline of it grows, and good habits can grow just as bad habits can. And I just wanted to tell you guys a story about my ice bath this morning. So thanks for letting me do that.
I appreciate that, Josh. That's impressive. And it got me thinking
do you have
too.
Video of it?
I don't. I thought about it, but I was like,
I'll do it. I'll do it, dude. You have to take a video of it.
I'll do it naked next time, and I'll play that video.
Yeah. The thing I was going to say is, as things snowball, though, like for us, this morning's a good example for me too. I came off duty this morning. I didn't sleep awesome last night at work. But I have found, especially with 2 little kids and recording a lot of times coming off duty, no matter whether I got a bad night's rest at all, digging into it and getting a morning workout in is absolutely imperative for me to maintain even normal energy levels throughout the day. So set the alarm this morning at 6:30. Absolute last thing I wanted to do when I was sitting in my bunk was go in and get a run and a lift in. But I did it, and my whole day's better for it. This conversation, time with my kids that I had this morning, intentionality with my wife, everything, it really flows downhill of that habit. It could go the other way. Bad night's rest, don't work out today, maybe eat like shit. Habits compound, and I think for me, just the truth of when I least want to do it, that is the most important time for me to do it.
100%.
Right? I want to eat like absolute dog shit tonight and drink 4 vodka tonics. Maybe it's time to hydrate and eat some celery. I absolutely don't want to work out. Now's the time to go dig in, get some sweat out. And it's unbelievable how much that changes the trajectory of my life at this phase when things are a bit busier and energy is in short supply. Being looser with your habits has consequences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having listened to your podcast about sleep, you mentioned during it that you had that issue from like 2 o'clock to 4 to 6 o'clock where you had trouble sleeping. Has that gotten any better with the advice he gave you?
It has. It has gotten better. The breathing for me is really important. It's hard to focus on your breathing and focus on other things. So you go back and listen to the podcast for the folks here, but he gives some really good breathing exercises that, man, totally help me calm down, most of the time. Last night was just a bunch of different things going on at the same time. So like I said, if I
rough,
eat
man.
really bad before I sleep, I know it happens. And so I don't know why I do it, but I do it, once in a while, and you're like, you idiot. So, sometimes you gotta say you idiot and start again. Like, okay, like I learned from it. Let's keep going.
That happens to me often. I'm lucky enough to get good sleep at home, but when I'm at work, we get a call at like 1 o'clock in the morning, get back at like 2:33. It's over for me. Like getting back to sleep after that. And you got scared awake, you go do whatever you have to do. You come back and like toning it back down for sleep again for me is like, I got to figure out something because it's really getting me lately.
Well, and for us,
breathing techniques.
I think we have to be even more cognizant of having no misses in our health outside of being firemen. Like A, there's strain on our body. B, the sleep every 3rd night. I mean, we do sleep on paper. The number of calls, even for a department of our size, might surprise people. Like the cadence with which people call 911 is so much higher during the daylight hours. So there are nights we sleep. There's many nights there's only 1 call. But I am still consistently astonished. Even when we sleep through the night, Josh, I'll get home and I will feel absolutely shot. And so I've said this to people that I love and care for and all the dudes we work with. It's like, you don't have as many misses. You need to be to be good with your diet. You need to be good with exercise. You need your mental health. You need to have resources and friendships and therapists, whatever it is that get you back to center. Because when I'm sitting around and I feel off, and then I'm like, oh yeah, no wonder I feel off. It's because we ran 2 ambulance calls last night and I'm shot. From recording the pod and going more down the health journey with this business and all these people you're talking to, this might be a good way to end. Like, what are some main things that you've implemented from a health and habit perspective that you weren't doing, say, 5 years ago, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I first is the eating before sleep. So I don't typically, I did last night, but I don't typically eat, within 2 hours of going to sleep. Or else if I do, I have really especially if it has any kind of carb component, It does have an impact on my sleep. I mean, I think the biggest thing is I know this has kind of become cliche a little bit, but like I think the low carb thing for me has been a massive impact on my health. So, I think metabolic health is something that everybody needs to take a look at and understand whether you're metabolically healthy. And, I think the stat is that 88% of us can't say that they're metabolically healthy. And so, you should look, and I've got a couple posts on it. We talk about it in my podcast, but there's kind of 5 components and you can kind of go through them. And for $50, you can figure out, are you metabolically, healthy? And so those are 5 things that I'm very, very focused on. And that's why I get labs at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year to see, how is my A1C, which is just a measure of, your blood sugars over a 3-month period of time. Where is my HDL? Where are my triglycerides? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very, very focused on metabolic health, because if you're metabolically healthy, it's something like 3x less time, or you're 3x more likely if you're metabolically unhealthy to get cancer and heart attacks and things like that. So metabolic health has been a super big focus of mine over the last, couple of years, especially.
Yeah.
Josh, we can coax guys into that to get their testosterone numbers. We got a dude, Andy, at the department that just will not shut the fuck up about his testosterone numbers. He went and got labs. He had 884 T, Josh? He's just been spouting off the number
that clown size, dude.
The whole
I think
year.
He's full of shit.
He just says 884, and he dares everybody to go get labs. I think we may need to bribe that physician, by the way. Have him get labs again in 2024.
Give him like
compile
a
some funds, crowdfund to pay off that physician to tell him his T's like 320 or something.
Yeah. Dude, he'll take whatever the guy tells him to take. Like, okay, give me anabolic steroids. I need to raise my T.
I love it. Anything.
And you want to give us a handoff to Crowdhealth and the Sovereign Health podcast?
One thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, we are introducing a Lightning product in the beginning of 2024. And so in essence, what you're going to be doing is you'll be crowdfunding over Lightning. And so our view on this is, if we can utilize Lightning with even a small percentage of the healthcare, market cap, dollars spent on healthcare, which is 4.3 trillion, that will lead to hyper Bitcoinization. And that's really what I'm focused on is, I want to change food. I want to change money. I want to change healthcare. Those are the 3 things I'm focused on. So Crowdhealth is, all in on all 3 of those things. So please, if you're at all interested in taking a look, join crowdhealth.com. Crowdhealth BTC is a new Twitter account that we put up specifically for folks interested in doing this over Lightning. And so it works the same way as Crowdhealth. It's just the funds are transferred between you. We have an integrated wallet in the Crowdhealth system. It goes between your wallet and their wallet. So you'll have enough, money in your Bitcoin wallet to be able to pay for these healthcare expenses. You can off ramp them and pay for them in dollars. You can keep them in Bitcoin. It's a great way to transfer assets from dollars to Bitcoin. Again, if you want to know more, it's Crowdhealth BTC on Twitter is probably the best place to go. So would love anybody who's interested to use, and use your code, right? Blue.
Yep.
6 months for $99 a month. And again, you do it once. You don't have to worry about healthcare ever again. You don't have to worry about looking at all those crazy insurance plan deductibles and copays and co-insurance and all that kind of crap. Do it once. There's no renewal dates or anything like that. It's just month to month. Whenever you want to quit, you can quit, or you want to go on forever. We'd love that too. So, join crowdhealth.com is the website.
With Crowdhealth, you can call 911. Josh and I can show up, and you can just focus on our beautiful faces. You don't need to worry about bills, just the high level care that the two of us deliver.
Speaking of our beautiful faces, you guys would be shocked how much we get hit on by old ladies. Like 80-plus-year-old ladies, they come out of the woodwork, and they don't play games anymore at 80 years old. Like, they double down, and they're like, what are you doing tomorrow?
I love it, man.
Yeah.
They're calling 911 just so you guys can show up to the house, I'm sure.
Oh, that happens on occasion.
Hurt wrist. Come and help me.
Come straight down my back.
Some handsome gentlemen at our agency. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
Andy,
right, Andy, thanks,
great
man.
chat, and I'm sure we'll see you in person at a conference coming up here maybe next year. And
I'd love
appreciate
that.
what you folks are doing. Stay in the trenches.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.